We're live. It's just
Oh, okay.
I was trying to sign up a chat. Just ignore when I'm trying to do things in the background.
All right,
It's fine.
sorry. So, yeah, the spiritual war is something that is being fought constantly by powers against humanity generally. So there is almost like two forces in the universe. There is dark and there is light. We know that they have to work together at times. We know that we're made up of both of those kind of forces within us. Survival dictates that we do need both elements. We do need to delve into both light and dark. But the biggest thing that's always been happening in the background is a fight for power. So resources, power and domination. And that is the darker side of things. So we see that in the way that really kind of rich, wealthy families, people that dominate a lot of the resources of the earth, that control what goes on in the earth, things like the media, stuff like that. They take a dark turn because of the corruption of the souls. So the biggest goal is to, when I say steal souls, it sounds very fantasy-like, but really what it is trying to take the entrapment of a human soul, an element of that person, and use it for their own gain. So that is happening, and that has been happening since the dawning of time. So one of the ways that you can obviously win that war is to keep your soul intact. So that's the biggest theme of what the spiritual war is going to be. Are we ready for the first slide, hun? Or are you still doing some stuff?
No, it's okay. It's okay. And like anything, they always tell you what they're going to do. So you have to be a willing participant to actually, end up in a bad place. So, this series where we're going to try to have sort of solution as well along the way. Things that we do and things that we know that may work. Everyone's different, but I think the main thing is to always just be aware and be knowledgeable about the people you're dealing with. It could be your family, it could be a boss, it could be anyone who's trying to, basically drag power from you. And but again, you'll know that if you decide not to involve yourself, it's probably one of the smartest things to do. But don't get over involved with any of it, and take everyone and what they're doing with a grain of salt at the end of the day, because you're better off with your own power and realising that you do have a lot of power. Everyone does, and collectively we have immense power. But unfortunately, especially in the last half a decade, it looks like most people are choosing just to roll over and cop it. So that drags us down with it. Anyone trying to fight back just gets dragged down the hole with them. So,
but we don't really, because I think that we stand in our own strength, but it's harder without unity. So when we are doing things like this, we're almost trying to bring awareness to people in a way. So it's kind of like our little way of illuminating this aspect, and a lot of people are aware, which is good news, and I feel like more people are standing a bit stronger here, so that's positive.
Yeah, my take is just on the, we are all one. We are all the same thing at the end of the day, and humans are pretty much gods in their own right. So, the more people doing good, the more good's going to come. It's just how it is, but yeah, anyway.
So the introduction to Shadow and Spark, we're going to talk about that. This is kind of our topics for today. We're going to talk about significant astrology and seasons and how they are used for either good or bad purposes. So those dates and, nature actually has kind of energy, and those seasons and those timings of the astrological events do affect things. Dates and the occult. The occult is a massive subject, but dates are definitely used in occult settings to manifest desire, and how they can be used for manifestation. And then we're going to go to, both of us, some examples in popular culture and how these dates are used for manifestation, either good or bad. So it doesn't always have to be doomy and bad. Sometimes these dates are used for positive as well.
Yeah, so Shadow and Spark, I don't know, I think we only came up with the name yesterday. We kind of, we spent a lot of time in a spa in the afternoon trying to relax and going over days' events, and me and Mindy always talk about pretty wacky stuff when we're chilling. And so Shadow and Spark, it doesn't necessarily mean a lot, really.
Sorry.
If anything, Mindy's a bit of a spark and I'm a bit of a shadow, so it's kind of kind of, it was just a name that took, you know.
We
were
switch
just,
between sometimes. So.
yeah, so, you know, so Shadow and Spark doesn't really mean a great deal in theory, but it sounded catchy enough to call this series Shadow and Spark. So I do other ones where I do like Mad Mats, and that's more of a kind of a joke conspiracy kind of lives that I do occasionally, and we've got a few others coming up. We're offering a lot of different ones. So Shadow and Spark is just to summarise this kind of topic. So anything that's kind of spiritual and involves light and dark, Shadow and Spark sounded right. So don't
That's
read
right.
into that too much. It's just
We thought it was a catchy name when we heard
that's
it.
all
so-
it is. It's a catchy name. So yeah, don't read into anything too much. And I probably should say quite early, we're not doing any rapture stuff. That's not what we do. So just FYI, if that's what you're into, maybe go away. save you some time.
In fact, we're not religious people.
No, we're not religious
we're very
people.
spiritual people, but religion is a topic that we believe is part of the control aspect, but we'll talk about that in
One of
another
many.
live,
But
one of the many.
We will cover some
Yes.
religious topics in this topic. There's no doubt you can't escape
No.
that. But yeah, just FYI, we're not religious, and we're not going to be screaming down your throat about anything we believe in too much. We have a lot of ideas and theories, but none of that is definitely a fact. We're not saying we know anything more than anyone else, and we're not here to start a cult or anything. Not quite yet, anyway. Anyway.
So why spiritual warfare? I think that's the big question. Spiritual warfare is something that is a soul level fight that's been going on. So there are, our belief, or my belief I'll say, I won't even speak for you, Matt, but I'm pretty sure we're on the same page here, is that we incarnate with a soul. So we have, the only word that we have in the English language is that word, which is basically our essence that we have in our meat sack, basically. So that essence comes down from either lots of experience for lifetimes and incarnations, and ends up here in this timeline. I believe the world is also constantly in different timelines, so there's always things happening simultaneously, different timelines, different energy. It's all about energy. So our internal essence of who we are is the soul, and so there is this fight for domination, and there's always been in our folklore, in our fairy tales, in all of our literature, stories of light and dark, good and evil, that kind of thing. Even in religious aspects, there's the good and the evil. So what it basically means is that, especially in this timeline, we're dealing with a big significant spiritual war again, and it's building up where the darkness is actually getting a lot of power. So we're seeing a resurgence of that. So we get almost golden years where we get a bit more light energy taking over, a bit more harmony, and then we get these darker years, and that's where we're kind of progressing to. So why spiritual warfare? I think the message is that we want to illuminate some of those things from the old, some of the imprints on our own souls that we actually feel that we're connected with, and also just to be able to talk about what humans can do just in their own individual lives to counteract this heavy energy, because it is there, and what we can do to try to not partake and also not give in to what they're trying to do to us as people.
As we go along with this, every time I do a live, something goes wrong. So my chat is being a bit of a bitch, to put it lightly. But do comment and add your point of view as we go, because again, it's not just our point of view. I enjoy decoding with other people, and a lot of this series is going to be decoding things. So, getting other people's opinions as well, and it gives us more to go on. So, feel free to throw in anything in the chat, as we go along, and I'll do my best to try to get us back online on the chat so I can read all the different platforms. But just FYI.
Oh, it's a bit frustrating, hun. I didn't realise you can see the chat. So Matt's trying to take control of that side of thing. He's got a lot more screens than I do, so he can see more than I can. So anyway, I'm just going to keep rolling with that, honey, until you get that
Yep,
live.
you just go.
So touching on some of the themes of what we're going to be talking about with Shadow and Spark series is basically all the elements of how far they will go to try to basically get you to hand your soul over. So a soul cannot be taken unwillingly. It needs to be handed over. So you need to make a choice. Life is all about dichotomies and choices. So every day, every moment we are making decisions, we have free will of the soul. But that free will can be tarnished, that can be dominated, that can be controlled by other entities who use things in their power to try to control others. So what can you do to try to keep that strength, keep that ability? You can use some of these kind of elements in nature. You can use some of these astrological events. You can dive into some of those things in knowledge, even in your own spiritual beliefs. It still matters, and protect yourself. So some of the themes we're going to be talking about include, today will be about dates and how they use dates and astrological events to manifest their desires. We'll be talking about some of the examples, some significant events of the past, and how that ties into humanity's control and what they're doing that way. We'll be tying into things like how they use energy to manipulate. We'll be talking about timelines. We'll be talking about all sorts of different things. So things that are really wacky and weird about the spiritual world. We'll be tying into those, some folklore in our history, some of our interesting stories that we have that most people know, and we'll be talking about things like soul imprints. We'll even be touching on really personal topics like family and how that can impact on energy. We'll be talking about psychic warfare. There's so many topics and elements that this series will showcase. Even things like how they obviously, like Matt said before, tell you what they're planning on doing so that you can be prepared. All sorts of topics are coming into this series, so it's going to be really exciting. But today is a real simple introduction around the dates, and we'll also be focusing on how your solutions are going to kind of fight this fight, and what you can do as an individual to really stand strong in the face of this war.
And welcome a human being.
Welcome.
And I agree. Yep, we're all human beings and we are all one.
That's exactly
This
right.
is just, we're a pack of meat sacks sitting around talking at the moment, but there's a lot more to it, and we are all one. When people realise that, it'll be a different planet, that's for sure. But yeah, welcome.
Thanks for being here. So our next topic is talking about significant astrology and seasons. So a lot of you are more adept at astrology even than I am. I touch on astrology. I have a fair bit of knowledge around it, but it's not necessarily something that I think I'm an expert in by any means. I do understand how it works. I do understand planetary alignments, and I get aspects and things like that, but I am not an astrology expert. If you are, it'd be really interesting to hear your take on it. Please share some of your knowledge with us. I always love learning. But astrology in a general sense is used by the powers that be to manifest outcomes. And astrology is basically constellations that form different aspects to other constellations and other planets at certain times of the year. So certain alignments influence events here on Earth. So we know the ancients, we know in history there has always been a significant connection to the celestial bodies, and we still have that connection because influences from the way the Earth turns, the seasons, the way nature cycles itself has a celestial, big celestial influence. Now, the dark powers that be try to take these events and control them for their own gain. And that's a topic in and on itself, but that is basically how they use these events. They did forget about one major thing, and that major thing is what I call soul imprints. So that is, some of us have been born, most of us have been born with some kind of imprint of the soul, and we have that knowledge innate. They can't take that away from us. That comes in this incarnation. So if your soul is intact, you will be able to fight this spiritual war. And thankfully there are a lot of people that have kept their souls intact. A lot haven't, but I don't believe that has to be a permanent thing. The goal is to keep your soul intact. Is there anything you want to add to that one, Matt?
No.
Okay, no, that's all right.
I was actually listening to you for a minute. I was playing around with something.
Well, that's normal, isn't it?
I've already heard all this. She tells me every day.
Okay, so this is just a quick diagram just showing the constellations of the astrology constellations in the sky. So it's how those stars are mapped and how they've been named, and the times of year that they're more prominent at different angles. So we have the Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpius, Sagittarius, and Capricornus. So they all have a representation of an animal based on the shape of their constellation, but also of the kind of their aspects as well. So that wheel that you can see to the side there has all of the different symbols of astrology that have been used for a long, long, long time, and the dates that coincide with that astrology. And so that is also measured in degrees, so numbers come up, and it's always in 30 degrees, so number 3, which we'll get to in a minute. And it's the way the sun is the middle of the astrology wheel. We have a yin and yang symbol, which is also representative of sun and moon light, is how the earth moves around the sun, and how those planetary alignments are affected by the sun. The sun is the god of humanity of this planet, okay, and that's why in religious circles and things like that, you'll hear lots of terminology like the sun, So
Son of God.
Yeah, well, the Son of God in Christianity is really, in my opinion, representing the sun. All right, so this is a depiction of a wheel of the year in pagan understandings. This is very old, but this is the soul imprint that I was talking about before. In the Dark Ages, when Christianity swept through Northern Europe, they took a lot of this away from the people. They took a lot of this knowledge away. But spoken word, traditions, language, soul imprints kept it going. So we know that there are seasonal celebrations that occur all throughout the world to depict Mother Nature and the elements and the change that occurs for our survival. So that included things like growing food, it included things like connecting back to family, going to war. All of the things that we do as humans were based on these seasons or these changes in the year. And so the powers that be have this knowledge. I think the Vatican probably has a lot of this locked away from the Dark Ages, but that's just me. I'm taking a wild guess there. But I feel like a lot of this knowledge is here. We have it in our souls. We know this, okay? So we do put terminology to it based on all different cultures. But basically, there are times of the year where we have, winter solstice, for example, summer solstice, where the days are really long or really, really short, and that's going to influence what events happen here on Earth, what occurs astrologically, and how we can utilise those times to connect to the spiritual world as well, how the powers that be use those times to connect to the spiritual world for their darkness as well. But I believe there's a spiritual war even that we can't see, through people that have a lot of power and resource who are actually fighting good and bad as well. So I don't think that everybody who has some influence over resources on this planet are dark. I feel like most of them are, but I feel like there is a little glimmers of light there. I feel like there are some people there who are actually fighting the good fight. That's just a feeling. What do you think about that one, Matt?
Well, I've been good and bad many times, and it's a conscious decision you kind of make, and I don't know, the bad always seemed like a lot of fun. So
that's interesting though to me. I always find it interesting because
I don't anymore. I'm an old man, dad, and all the rest of it. So I'm a pretty good boy now. But
you made the choice though.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I've done some really silly shit and shit you regret. And
I think we've all done that though. Like we've all got things that we wish we could have, but we've learnt from those things.
Totally. I don't have regret anymore.
No,
I don't
you shouldn't
care,
have regret.
It's but it is fun to be naughty and dark and that kind of thing. And it's very easy to get a crew around you if you're going to be dark. Very, very hard to get a crew around you when you're being nice. That's one thing I've noticed, is that if I go ranting and raving on stupid TikToks or whatever, I'll get views coming out my backside. But if I talk about something serious, like this kind of topics, generally, I don't have the fanboys. So that's kind of, I don't know, it's a mirror though. I see that as a mirror to where we're at on the planet at present, is that kind of thing, that people are more led to the dark than the light. It's just how it is. So.
It's more of a pull, isn't it? Like if you've got dark energy, you can be more alluring. Like we understand the concept of, say, a narcissist, for example. That is a word that's used quite freely at the moment.
Absolutely.
But that is that energy of being able to manipulate others for your own gain, and that's what's happening on a wide scale. That's why we're seeing more of that, right? So people gravitate towards that because it's easier than having to be in your own power and stand against that. So somebody who appears powerful, strong and confident, whether it's good or bad, but more of the dark side, it's very alluring. It kind of appeals to the wild side of people too.
It does indeed.
So that's kind of how they kind of get you on side.
And I think, anyway, I'll move on.
No, say what you're going to
No, it's all
say.
good.
So the moon phases are always intrinsically involved in dates that they choose to exude an event. So we know that lunar eclipses, if you don't know this, lunar eclipses are often more harsher aspects because it's the darkening of the earth. So the earth goes really, really dark when there is an eclipse over the moon, and so that brings a lot of dark energy. So we see a lot of big events happening where there is especially a full moon lunar eclipse, because that full moon comes to illuminate, cleanse, and help to bring, the tides full, that womanhood full. It's all about fertility. And when that becomes eclipsed, it can often be a very dark sign. So we have obviously oppositional aspects to the way the moon cycles work in the northern and southern hemisphere. So it's interesting that they'll often choose events to perform in either the northern or southern hemisphere. In Australia, we had the 2000 Olympics, for example, and that went over a period of the equinox, and it was the spring equinox down here, and it went over a full moon cycle. So I just find that really interesting, but it was a southern hemisphere moon cycle in the year 2000. So I just always think that was interesting that they chose that southern hemisphere for bringing in the millennium for the Olympics, and quite deliberately too, because it was oppositional. So some of those ceremonies that we see, like the opening ceremonies of the Olympics.
We're doing a series on that one.
Yeah, we're going to do a series on some of the individual ones too, because they're fascinating, aren't they? Even things like the Grammys, or like some of those events, they will pick the dates they choose are very, very interesting, and it's usually moon cycles are definitely heavily involved alongside astrological aspects. They're all tied in together, but always looking at the moon phase, which sign the moon's in, what the moon's doing whenever an event is planned. And it's really funny because I'll say to Matt, the moon's in whatever today, and this is its cycle, and this is what they're doing, and he's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I do know as a good boy narcissist that the moon affects me heavily. It does though. When there's a full moon in Virgo or whatever, I go mental. I'll be
I think
different.
more when it's in Cancer, because it's your rising sign.
Yeah, well,
and Cancer's ruled kind of by the moon.
Whichever one makes me go crazy.
Your emotions too with the moon.
Out the thing.
But you also tap in a lot when the moon's full.
Yeah, I'm pretty open then.
Pretty psychic. You connect a lot. Okay, so these are kind of, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. It'd take us all day to do it. But this is kind of a slide that talks about how they use occult rituals. So occult rituals are synonymous with taking a date that was used for nature festivals, for positive reinforcement, things like that, and changing it into something dark. So if we just look at some of these dates, say Candlemas, that was a period of bringing the light in. So that was around January 20th. That was the dawning of the Aquarian sun. And that was a period where they would often light a whole lot of candles to celebrate the coming of the light. It was midwinter over in the Northern Hemisphere, and it would bring warmth and love to the households. But in occult circles or dark circles, they changed this tradition to work on things like abduction and preparation for sacrificial victims. So really, really dark stuff. There's sexual and blood rituals that occur in dark occult circles. Whereas on the positive side of Candlemas, it was all about bringing in the light and celebrating protection and love. So it's very interesting how they can turn a positive event where people gathered and celebrated, energy, and make it something really, really horrible. Interestingly enough, which we're going to touch on soon, is January 20th is the inauguration of the president, and it was changed in 1933, but we'll get to that. So other dates here are the first of New Year's Day was a Druid feast day. So very, very positive, because it was considered the dawning of the sun. So not because it's the start of the year, our calendar year, it was the dawning of the sun. So remember that the shortest day is December 21st, roughly December 22nd over in the Northern Hemisphere. So as we're moving into January past December, like a week after that period, we have the lightening of the year. So the sun starts to get a little bit brighter, and so they would have a big feast day celebrating the coming of the sun. So that was a very positive day. Now it's celebrated as New Year's Day. People get quite, there are a lot of happy moments with people. There's a lot of debauch even in the West that goes on New Year's. It's synonymous with partying and getting drunk and, all of that, especially in our country. It might not be for every country, but for the West, that's definitely what happens. And so the fireworks were always a symbol of the Candlemas, the light coming in. So they've taken that now so that they can have everybody watching these events, and then they can start planning what is to come for the rest of the year in an occult sense. So they need your focus, they need collective consciousness to enact some of these events. So if everybody's locked in watching this, especially with programming, television, they can actually grab all of that energy and use that because everybody's locked into that event, everybody's participating in some way. So it gives them more power, if you will. All right, so there's some of the dates there. It's pretty awful stuff
horrific.
if you read that.
It's pretty horrific to read, really.
Okay, but this is not what these events are typically used for in normal, in positive occult circles. The occult is benign. The occult is just a term for magic, for ritual. It can be used for dark or light. So don't ever think the occult is always evil. Dark occult circles are what we're focusing on here.
I don't know when all the dates would have changed over to and who did that. It'd be interesting to kind of research when all this changed. Like how many thousand years ago? Did it happen to be 2,000 years ago? Just by chance?
I would say Dark Ages probably, because this was when Christianity took over, and so they needed those dates from, pagan cultures, from really spiritual druid cultures to change them.
But they just couldn't delete them. Obviously they don't want to delete it. They just got to change it. Yeah, I know. But that's why they can't delete it and just make a new date some other day, because it won't have any power.
That's right. And so you'll see here, like say March 20th is the equinox, the spring equinox up in the Northern Hemisphere. It's the autumnal equinox down here in the south. But that is celebrated now with orgies and sexual rituals up in the north. And so to me, that used to be Ostara, which was the coming of the spring. And so Ostara was the, the rabbit and the eggs and the coming of life and all of that, which turned to the Christian Easter. And that was around the time of the spring equinox going into April as well, so that coming of spring. And so interestingly enough, the time from March 20 to April 21, they now use it for sacrificial victims and things like that. So it's pretty sad that they use these really positive times of nature and spring and fertility to perform some of these rituals. So May 1st to May 7th is called Beltane. So that changes every year depending on the moon cycle. So the first full moon in May is traditionally where Beltane would have been celebrated. So Beltane is May Day, so the Druid Fire Festivals, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Beltane is high spring, so that is just before the high summer starts, before the summer solstice starts over in the Northern Hemisphere. And it is a day of celebrating the crowning of the May Queen. So that is where the May Queen representing nature, she is at her highest self. Her energy is very, very strong, Mother Nature. So she's crowned and everybody celebrates the coming of the harvest and the fruition that summer will bring to everybody. So that is usually a positive day, as we can see here. They will do lots of fires. They do more now, lots of laser shows and drones and things like that, but it's all to use that energy of fullness of fertility to get everybody's collective consciousness together. So just one more slide on this, because it is a bit dark and we don't want to give it much energy. We don't want to give it much energy, but you can see here how much they do through the summer. And summer in the north is a period where it is full, it is rich, the sun is its highest, so they need to counteract the positive energy of the sun. And we'll notice with this spiritual war at the moment that we're getting a lot of magnetism on the sun. Matt knows more about that scientifically, but we're getting a lot of the Australis Borealis, the lights that we're taking photos of. We're getting them on
the east coast of Australia, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
We've never had, the sky going pink and green.
And all over, if you look at the satellite images of the world when it's happening, the sun is letting off a lot of magnetism at the moment. So it is revolting against this. The sun will always counteract what's happening. It always responds to human energy. So I think at the moment with, a lot of this darkness coming and evolving itself in the world, we're seeing the sun's reaction. So even though those lights look really pretty, it is the sun telling us, look, I'm deflecting this energy. I'm not allowing you to, stop what I can do, stop my power, stop my influence on human beings. All right, so that's just some more dates. I won't stay here. All All right, now I'll let Matt talk about this slide because he finds numerology very interesting. Have a talk about that one, Matt.
Well, yeah, I'm not really into numerology myself, and I don't really do it as such. I do read a bit about it. I just like to roughly know what's going on and why people do things. And a few people I kind of not so much follow, but read their gear. Their numerology is crazy, and they seem crazy when they do what they do, but it sort of does make sense a lot of the time. And numbers are just like, I don't know, it's about the only thing that seems to make sense in the universe. We seem to be able to manipulate them, or they're just right or whatever. But it seems to be able to sum up a lot of things, sometimes a lot better than just language and that kind of thing. So world leaders are constantly against it. Basically, it's almost as though you're pulling your pants down on camera if you start talking about numerology, to the fact of Musk banned it on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. Again, I'm not a big fan of that place, but when you got someone as powerful as Musk running around banning stuff, there's a reason he's doing that. And keeping the masses stupid is primary goal number one of people who have a lot of money, because we are just the slaves, we're just the fodder, so we're like ants under their feet. So to ban that just sets off alarm bells to me. And then you've got the other side of the story where you've got Prince Charles. He has his own like herbalists and numerologists and all these kind of people hang around him. He's very much into the older kind of stuff, the older kind of druid or pagan or whatever you want to call it. He seems to be 100% behind it, to the fact of there's so many quotes from him. For example, the one on the screen where there's a divine source, ultimate truth, and that truth can be expressed by means of numbers. So he knows the power of the numbers. And was it King Henry VIII you were talking about the other day, who has his
own astrology
plaque in the
Hampton Court. So he's the clock at Hampton Court is King Henry VIII's astrology chart, his birth chart, because they all had resident astrologers in the monarchy, so they probably still do. I know that there's talk about them having resident astrologers, and so we tied into the other day, which is a whole nother topic for this, I think, about how William has similar aspects in terms of his conjunctions and his sun sign as King Henry VIII did, and he was a young king as well, and we're in modern times. So when we say young king now, we don't mean 18, we mean in their 40s. So he's definitely going to see a rulership younger than most other kings in this day and age, and so it's very interesting to see that play out in astrology, but also how much energy they put into astrology. Elizabeth I, she had her astrology chart done as well, so you can actually go to Hampton Court and see them. I think it'd be a fascinating thing to do one day.
It is interesting, but again, I don't personally get into numerology too much because I'm not smart enough to understand what's going on half the time, and I think it's quite in depth. If you know what you're doing, it's quite in depth, and I think the few people I know who do it, and they do it hardcore, to me they've almost like jumped down a rabbit hole they can't get back out of. They're stuck with numbers. It's like the Matrix thing in the background here. They literally seem to live like that, being able to pull numbers out of a hat and making sense of it all. But again, I'm no expert of any of it.
And the numbers around your birth date really do kind of add up to a number, and so that gives you like a life path direction to follow. So Matt's is number 8, mine is number 9, and then we have like 9 years between us. We have 9s in our chart. Like there's lots of significant numbers around this, right? So it's all very interesting how numerology works just in your everyday life and your life path, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I find it fascinating. I delved into it a little bit, but it's not something that my core focus is around, but I do like to understand it to a degree so that obviously we can use it as a tool for ourselves, but also the healing work that we try to do as well.
And the point of slides like this is more the topic of today is roughly numbers and dates.
And how they can use it.
Yeah, how important they are to the powers that be, to pull things off on certain days, certain times, certain moon phases, all that kind of stuff. And again, they always tell you what they're going to do. So if you're aware of what they're doing, and you can kind of see through the BS when they're carrying on about it, but they will let you know what they're doing. But it's the next slides will explain what we're talking about.
Yeah, but it is true. Numerology has a big role to play here. It's
Massive.
a very ancient code that exists in this timeline, probably other timelines as well. So many world events are planned during lunar or solar eclipses or during a seasonal or astrological shift. So two big examples that we're going to focus on for today, just to keep it nice and simple without going into every single event, is the coronation of Charles III in May 2023 and the USA presidential elections. So we're going to talk about the inauguration, particularly of the president, rather than the elections themselves. So the coronation of Charles was a very fascinating date, because we in our lifetimes, a lot of people never got to see a coronation because the Queen lived for such a long time, so they never got to see an event like this. They might have known of historical ones, but never got to actually witness this. Interestingly enough, Queen Elizabeth II passed away on September the 8th, 2022. So 8 months later, they decided to do his coronation. Now, there is mourning time that's allowed for the Queen, obviously. King. So this Mercury was also retrograde, which I find very interesting. They'll often pull off big events when Mercury is turning its backwards, and that's because communication in humanity is a little bit trickier when Mercury is retrograde. So a lot of things tend to go a little bit awry. People's power gets a little bit less intense. It's harder for people that are manifesting positive energy to rise up when Mercury is retrograde. It can impinge a lot of things like that. So it was interesting that we had all of these astrological events and this old pagan ceremony occurring during his coronation.
Sorry, human being, yes, is the sound back? Sorry, I accidentally deleted my camera when I was trying to do something, so we probably lost sound for 30 seconds there. I had to quickly get back in.
Was that the whole presentation of what I was saying?
Thank you, I won't say much.
Was that...
you would have lost sound for a minute, I accidentally...
Thank you so much for telling us.
Sorry,
no,
luckily
that's
it's written on screen.
Yeah.
I'll try not to do that again.
It's okay, technology. And I was literally talking about how Mercury retrograde is a time when technology, when communications and things like that can go awry, and
it just did.
It stops the voice speaking out against these things. So partly a part of this too was to do this event during a time when Mercury is retrograde, so the power of people that are really aware of what's going on would have struggled to communicate. Is your camera going, or are you...
It's all good.
All right. So it has long been heralded, just in case you missed my audio before, that the lunar eclipse, especially in Scorpio, where his sun sign is actually Scorpio, it connects back to him individually. So being the next monarch, they obviously wanted to enforce the bloodlines. They wanted to enforce his crowning. And this date was very significant 8 months later, because they needed to make sure that all of the energy has been manifested towards the royals' goals. So they act as though they're a passive kind of entity in the background, but that is not true. They are very, very prominent in society. They have a lot more power than people give them credit for.
Absolutely. They're never in the eye. They're always in the public eye as nicety kind of tourist attractions, but nah. And it's much the same as the Vatican. That family and the Vatican together are just, oh my God.
So they're part of the ones we can see, but they don't show us their true colours, okay? So when we see this coronation, they needed to bring favour. So the crowning of the May Queen as well, around Beltane, was very interesting when we had Camilla come in, because she wasn't necessarily liked by the people. She was seen as the villain after Diana. But she needed to try to manifest that energy of the people by coming in and being crowned as the May Queen. So that's quite scary, because we have basically an evil queen lording over the place. She's very domineering to Charles, and in fact, the energy, psychic energy that I feel around Camilla is that she's controlling the ship, right? He's literally just a shadow of his former self, and he just follows orders basically, and she's the one directing everything. And so her energy, if you look at both of their birth charts, is much more prominent in terms of how she exerts power. So that's another thing for another day, breaking down some of these astrology charts. But right now, I think just focusing on how that was so significant as an event that it's almost laughable. It was ridiculous. And
8 months to do something seems, when you got a body lying around somewhere in a coffin, then you did nothing for 8 months. If I did that, I'd probably go to jail.
Yeah, so you wait to be coronated, so you're not actually the king for that period. You haven't been properly coronated. So it was so deliberate to wait till that time to actually put the crown on the head, to do the rituals. They were very pagan in nature. It was such an interesting thing to see little glimmers of. I didn't watch the whole thing. I didn't want to give it my energy.
I saw a few oddities on it, with like people wearing old gowns that look like like a Jedi, gown that running between like doorways, and really weird, just wacky shit was going on that day. And again, I didn't watch the whole thing. I just saw a few short clips of weirdness. Very strange people there as well. The people who attended, there was some pretty wacky people, and the staves they were holding and all these things. It was very symbolic, and I think most people wouldn't even know what they were doing. Even the Pope's doing that at the moment. He's walking around with a weird staff, and
we need
just
to
have
talk
a look
about
at what
his
he's walking around
stuff.
with.
Yeah, one day.
No, it's weird. He's wearing like witch's staff. Why would the Pope have a witch's staff? What's he doing? So, some pretty interesting times, as always.
So that one is huge, we know that, but they didn't just do this by accident, is what we're trying to get to. And 6 being the division of the 3, everything comes back to the 3, 6, 9. Okay, so the presidential inauguration is very interesting. You're going to have to follow me along here, because it goes back to long constellations in terms of astrology. So it hasn't always been that the president becomes inaugurated on January 20th. There was a amendment to the United States Constitution in 1933 of all years. Hitler had become Chancellor a few days earlier. That year, a lot happened in humanity, that 33, because the 3-3 was almost a period where they could start cementing a lot of their darker plans. So they decided that the president term would now begin on January 20th at noon. Prior to this, it was on the 4th of March. So let's talk about why they wanted to change the presidential inauguration. So if we go back to ages of how astrology works, we have whole ages of time. So outer planets and the way that they conjunct to each other can take thousands of years. So through the period of Jesus' birth all the way through to, up to recently 2021, we had the age of Pisces. So I think, the fish symbol with Jesus is often synonymous with the Pisces age. So we were on the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Everyone knows the song. If you're old enough to remember the song or know of your parents playing it, it was a very popular song, because it is true, the dawning of the age of Aquarius. The dawning of the actual age of Aquarius started at the vernal equinox, March 21 in 2001. Okay, and you look at March is the 3rd year, and 21 is 1 + 2 = 3. So, and 2021 it was, not 2001. I missed that slide. So again, 2 1s, 3. So that's a very 3 date, isn't it? March 21 and then 2021. So 333. So it literally started because it is basically the way the equinoxes work together. So talking about how ages work is a big, long slide that I don't want to bore you with, but basically they're periods of thousands of years of a particular sign, and moving into a different age is basically a transition from one timeline to another where there is a big theme. Basically, Pisces was all about, the emotional body, the water, trying to adapt to resources, trying to accumulate more resources. So it's all about the fish. So the symbol of the fish was abundance and gathering fish. We know that the fish net and all of that is symbolic of the age of Pisces. And we know that during that double millennium, we ended up with a lot of resource gathering, a lot of fight for resources in humanity. The age of Aquarius is all about digital. So it's all about bigger events. So widespread Aquarians are very free thinking individuals. And so as a sign, it's about those far-reaching things that we can connect with, things like space, satellites, AI, all of that is very Aquarian in nature. So very interesting that they knew that a few years later, and when we're talking ages, 1933 isn't that far away, it is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, they decided to mark that change. So in the past, March 4th was the date they inaugurated the president, and the sun was in Pisces. So it's very, very interesting, right? So Aquarius is when the date of January 20th turns from Capricorn to Aquarius. So it moves, it shifts into that next sign. So I think that is very interesting, that the sun shifts into Aquarius just as this is happening, and we have the age of Aquarius happening now. So that's why they've chosen January 20th to inaugurate the president. Coincidingly, they're also doing the WEF Davos conference on the same day, January 20th to January 27th, I think it takes place. So Aquarius is all about that. The sun moving into that is all about that shift to digital. So they really want to influence that digital space. So again, they have technology, they have information that we don't have yet. They allow us little glimmers of it so that they can test the waters, so they can see how we play with things, so they can connect back to what we do as individuals and say, this is how the stakeholders, as they call us, are using the technology, so that then they can get a gauge on how better they can control it. And that includes things like the president coming in to fruition, because obviously the president is very symbolic of, he's basically a puppet for those powers as well. So he's been given power, but it's not really his power. It's power of those who are controlling the system. So he gets to enact those powerful things. And so very, very interesting timing for them to be able to try and influence the masses, because we know the president is always on television, he's always on social media, he's always trying to speak to people and get the audience collectively to watch him. And so we know that this year it's going to be very interesting, because there is a lot of collective consciousness on this president, and that's why he's been chosen, in my opinion, because everybody is, whether good or bad, is focused on him. And so he's going to get a lot of shit done that I don't think is necessarily going to be good. And I feel like that's a big part of this spiritual war. And I'm sorry for those people that really love Trump, but I just don't think any of them are playing the good fight. Okay,
they're all the same actors.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
They're all in the same club.
I think, they're all definitely fighting this darker war. They're definitely trying to, they're going out to battle for those powers that be, because at the end of the day, soul corruption is really easy when it comes to money and wealth. So money and wealth, if people are focused on that solely, they start to lose their souls very quickly, because they've forgotten about connection, they've forgotten about family, they've forgotten about the deeper meaning of existence. And resource gathering is a big part of corruption of souls.
It's been deliberately done, the destruction of family and community. Yep. Then look at us now, everyone's by themselves. Now I'll just add, they always show you what they're going to do. Look at the WEF logo over there. You got where the O's are from World Economic and Forum, that slash that comes down, which also could be a moon phase or something, I don't know what it is, but it makes each of those O's a 6. So from the top, if you look at each one, it gives it the arc, which can be interpreted as a 6. So it's 666 is in the middle of the logo, right in front of your face.
Good observation.
And I'm not sure what the round half circle is, But I can guarantee you, it is probably some moon phasey thing that makes sense to them. It's probably like moon silhouette that forms the WF logo into 666.
That is so true. I
They're
never
showing
really
you.
noticed
It's
that
in your
before.
face.
Yeah.
CERN's the same. They've got 3 sixes in their logo. All these
3
institutions.
words, 3 words.
Yep, and logos are so powerful, like they're just
They
symbolism.
imprint in the brain.
Absolutely, but you look at it and you wouldn't pick it up straight away,
No.
but so many logos do this, and it's, you just, everything they show you, anyone who's trying to ram stuff down your face, go and look up what their logo is. It'll give you a bit of a sign as to what you're in for, and everything's symbolic, and they're not going to just write 666 across it, obviously, but to me, my interpretation of World Economic Forum is 3 sixes in their logo.
Yeah, so it's interesting 2021 as well, that we moved into March 21, 2021 into the age of Aquarius, because this is now a timeline shift. So we all knew Agenda 21 was a big thing. If you read a lot of books when you were younger and you were into more of the alternative spaces and you followed kind of some of this stuff, old bulletin boards in the 90s and stuff like that, there were lots of discussions around this Agenda 2021. Well, Agenda 21, I don't even think they said 2021, they said Agenda 21,
Yeah, it's just
right?
21.
And so that obviously came to fruition for those who really understand what was going on, and they exerted a lot of their actions around March. So that's another interesting time, because it is the sun moving into Pisces, and March is around that vernal equinox in the Northern Hemisphere. So notice a lot of stuff will happen March or September. When you're looking at dates, big significant world events will happen a lot, not always, but in those 2 periods of time, because we have the balance of frequencies, right? So if you're thinking, gosh, a lot of stuff happens in March or a lot of stuff happens in September, there are reasons for that as well. So even COVID kicking off was March. You know, that's when everybody locked down for the first time in the world, and that was around the vernal equinox in 2020. So I just think that's, again, you can have your theories around that, but I just thought it was interesting that that was the time frame around that as well.
And Agenda 21 had been planned so long ago, but again, it's 2 and 1 is 3.
Yep, and 21, and now we've got 30 coming, which is the 3. So
Yeah.
it'll be
2030 is going to be insane, I'd say.
Interesting.
Although they're pushing 2025 as a big problem too.
well, we're halfway
So-
there in the decade,
so-
aren't we?
2 minus from 5 minus 2 is 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all the same dates. It's always 3.
All right, so here, talking of 3s, the power of 3s in spirituality. We just touched on March and how that's a very significant event. September, that's a significant month. 3 and 9, and we have the 6 in the middle, which is June, which is summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, winter solstice down here. So the 3s are everywhere. So good or bad, 3s can be used for your own gain, for your own positivity. You're allowed to manifest things in your life as long as you give back what you get type thing. You exchange that energy as long as you're putting back in. It's actually okay to receive. We need to receive, because being a martyr, I don't believe, is a very positive thing at all. That drains people, and you can't really be of service to people when you're drained as an energy. So it's certainly not saying you have to be altruistic and, you know, run around, you know, like a monk, you know, trying to do everything like that. I don't believe that's actually helpful. But the triangle is the trinity of balance. It's the body, mind, and the spirit. So it's that connection to us as beings and animals as beings. It's the earth, the moon, of the sun. It divides and multiplies on itself. We know that 9 is such a fascinating number because all the multiplications add up to 9. There are 3 months to a season, so it's very cyclic in nature. And I'll just touch on this, I'm not going to go into the Christian stuff, but it is no coincidence that some iconic figures are 33, like Jesus. Okay, there's reasons why he was that age. It's not just a coincidence, in my opinion. But the 3s definitely have a lot of symbology. So I've just put up the pyramid with the eye there, because the all-seeing eye is actually a symbol that is used for positive energy about what we can see, the third eye in chakra sense, and the connection to our psychic abilities and what's beyond the veil. But in dark occult circles, they use the eye so that they're watching you, so that they see everything that you're doing. And you'll notice they do a lot of the Trinity symbols. I'm not one of those people that break down everyone whenever they make a hand gesture. I'm a big hand gesture person myself, so I don't think that half the time they're deliberately doing it. Sometimes people are just talking with their hands, but sometimes it's really obvious. Like if you see them at the Grammys, they'll be sitting there just like that on the camera. and you think that's really obvious. But when they're just like talking and throwing their hands around, no, I don't think there's too much to that. Okay, so I'm not that full on with it all. But the eye and the triangle in the eye is the ability to see beyond the dimensions. Okay, so we have that ability as humans. We can tap into that. We all have different ways that we can do that, but opening your third eye allows you to see and allows you to connect. And that doesn't mean that you're seeing apparitions or that you're hearing voices or anything like that. It means simply that you're opening yourself up to the knowledge, to the energy, so that you can be aware, so that you can utilize that for positive. But the powers that be unfortunately do this for power and gain. So where else do you see the eye? I know that it's on the American dollar bill. And I think that's very funny too, because it's in the triangle, so it's all about the Trinity again. So everything comes back to 3 is basically what my message is. I did ramble a little bit about the eye, sorry. But it is very much about the coming back to the Trinity and how everything goes back to 3. And if you break everything down in nature, the triangle, the 3, always makes sense. So they will use number 3 to harness that energy. We know that it's been painted to humans as a bad thing, things like control mechanisms like Christianity, where they'll say 666 is the devil's number, for example. No, it's not. It's a very powerful number because they use that number for manifestation, basically. So it's arbitrary, it's a number, but we can use it for good or you can use it for evil. There's always decisions being made as to how you utilize the 3. Do you want to touch anything on that, Matt, before I move to the next
Well,
one?
we'll be rambled enough on that.
I did ramble a bit, sorry guys. All right, now this is your one, Dol.
Oh, no, one of my favourite dudes, Nikola Tesla. So he had a manifestation technique which was 369, and he apparently followed this to the T. If you don't know who Nikola Tesla is, just Google that. It's too much to go into, but everything in the modern world that we have, he basically invented it, and everyone just stole everything off him. He died a pauper in the gutter, basically, and the government stole all his shit.
Soul intact, though.
Yeah, so he used the 369 as a hidden method. He reckoned it was like a mysterious one that he'd come across. He was a numbers guy as well. He was a freak, basically. So his goal was that every day he wrote down his goal 3 times in the morning, and then at say lunchtime or afternoon he did the same goals or different goals for the day if he'd completed them 6 times, and then he wrote down the goal 9 times by night time, and because he was such a numbers guy. And then people who are doing this kind of manifestation, it just so happens that he reckoned this was a secret one, and then if you just go and look at the patents he did, he was tapping info from somewhere. So he tapped this, and then he tapped into everything, and no one can still explain how he can do that, or how he had so much knowledge on things that he had no idea about. He did mention that he had tapped into demons too, so he reckoned he spoke to, let's call them saints or something to make it sound better. But yeah, he's one wacky dude, and a big numbers guy and a big dates guy. That was his thing. And manifestation, I agree with it. Like, I wouldn't have the time or the patience to sit around writing something down so many times a day. But I'm sure if you did, it would actually change your life. I could almost guarantee it. It would scare me a bit to even try to start something like that, because then I'd get too busy, and I'm pretty lazy, so I'd rather sit around and do a lot less than become some figure who has that many goals and have to go and achieve them all. So that's just my laziness. But manifestation's a real thing, and everyone does it without even realising it. And the more you do it, the more it's going to happen. And unfortunately, you can manifest really bad stuff, and you can manifest good stuff, and that's just the yin and the yang of the world. So Tesla was just very goal-driven for kind of humanity and science, and yeah, really interesting guy. But anyway, that'll do for...
No, and it is, manifestation is something that we do individually in our life. We could talk about that in another one, but we will literally consciously put a lot of energy into anything that we're trying to create, and that's usually with higher intention. So if you've got lower intention, you can still manifest, unfortunately. But if you've got really high intentions on what you want to create or where you want to go, you're allowed to have those balances. As long as you can feel that gratitude, that real connection to, you know, how much love there is and how lucky you've been to be able to experience, you know, this incarnation, you know, to be able to be here and to be in this energy. Gratitude is a real intrinsic thing that can't be, you have to kind of learn yourself. You have to have your own method of that. But just, you know, being thankful is such a simple thing that connects you to higher vibration, and it's one of those things that I believe ritualistically connecting to numbers definitely helps, but having gratitude definitely makes it even easier and better to connect to your higher self, so that you can bring in some of those positive things, some of those desires as well, that will enable you to do better for your goals, because it's all about what you can do for your goals on the planet as well, and how you can help and give back a little bit, because it's not just about taking, it's about the exchange of energy going on all the time.
Yeah, one of my main life goals has always been leave the place better than when you came.
Yeah.
And I think if people kept it, and that's not even a big goal, really,
No.
it's not, but if everyone left this planet and it was better than when you turned up, then you've done well. That's all you need to do, really, and little butterfly effects really matter. You don't have to be a world leader or anything like that. Everyone has their own little way to participate and to add to this experience that everyone's got, whether it's a simulation or whatever you think this thing is that we're all doing. It's you know, it's important. Gratitude's really important, and you know, but awareness is really important. How much you affect other things. A simple, you know, interaction at the shopping centre could change someone's life. It's just that butterfly effect thing that happens, and to be aware of it as, you know, as much as you can. Manifestation.
Yeah, and so it's funny when I saw this slide come up, because Matt and I were both kind of preparing for this event today, and we were both doing different slides ourselves just to talk about certain topics and things like that. And Matt had made this one and I'd made one about, you know, the introduction, talking about the goal is to, you know, for the soul. And so we were both doing this individually without realising that we were making slides like this, talking about what the spiritual war was. We know intrinsically what it is, basically, but it's interesting that we both went, the soul is the battleground, and that is the truth. That's what it is. So there are two kinds of people in the world, and those who know we're in a spiritual battle, and they're the ones who are obviously fighting the fight. And then there's those who don't know, and unfortunately that is the majority of people. So unfortunately their souls are very vulnerable. So we also have a big role to play in trying our best to work to try to help those souls, because they're almost like innocents, because they're not aware of what's at stake here. And so when you do something to try to support those people who don't realise they're not in the spiritual battle, you're actually doing a lot of good, because then that awareness may come in time for them, and that's the hope, is that they can start to protect their own souls a bit. And I think even just doing, I'm very fortunate to work in natural medicine, so I get to do a lot of healing work, and I see a lot of the spiritual emptiness and the void in people that's impacting on them physically, and I really, really do try to work within that space to try to heal that as much as I can, but it is up to the individual to really keep that intact. But if they don't know, knowledge is power. It feels almost like the game's a bit unfair, doesn't it? Because they're very sneaky in how they approach this soul battle. You know, they tell you what they're doing, but they don't tell you directly. They tell you with a mask on, basically, that they're doing these things. So this individual personal battle is really, really, really important. Everything, if just being aware is a huge thing, because you're actually, you know what's going on, and you've got a lot of power with that knowledge. And so that means that there are people winning there, and many are choosing not to progress. There is deliberate choosing not to progress. People feeling they want to pursue money, they don't want to think about love and light energy, they just want to be here, get heaps of shit and then die. Well, that's very empty, and they will feel that emptiness, but that is unfortunately a big part of humanity at the moment. But keeping your soul intact, working on you as an individual, can make a huge impact on those around you.
I'm always quite wary of people's price too, after watching the last few years of what went down, and watching how easily people are brought and silenced. And by doing so, you're complicit. You just are. And one day there will be kind of a levelling of people who run around and their price could only be a couple of $100 or a ticket to some concert, and they're prepared to throw everyone under the bus and destroy lives and do all that kind of thing, when I've always, and Mindy's the same, intrinsically we don't have a price. There's no amount of money or cars or whatever you could give me to do something that I don't want to do. And I outright refuse. I'm not interested. And money is pretty much the root of all evil. If we, with our businesses, we run 20 businesses, if we stuck with a few of them, we'd be absolute, we'd be rich as. We've had cryptocurrencies that we owned and controlled and ran in, 2013. Things like that could have turned out ridiculous. Like, our worth was 12 million US when we were doing that. And through the grapevine, maybe I actually wrecked the whole industry. Shit happened to the whole industry where it just dumped out. And I didn't give a shit. I really didn't. We used to gamble a quarter of a Bitcoin a day. We couldn't give a shit. It's not about the money, and it never should be. It should be about personal growth. And learning. I think it's so much worth more than money. And then if you're smart enough, then you might treat other people nicely and kind of, move on and maybe not have to repeat this cycle endlessly, because it feels like a prison planet some days, and my goal is to get off. There's got to be better than this, even though this is a pretty good ride if you treat it right. There is so much misery and depression, though, and everything else in it that, again, I think a lot of that comes back to money, chasing money, keeping up with the Joneses, and all these things, And people leave everything too late. Like, the amount of women I see having kids at 40 is ridiculous. That's my personal view, and I'll keep that, and I don't care if you like it or not. But to me, that's insanity. We just had a friend do it, yesterday? So that's just silly. I just, and when people are bringing children into this planet who really shouldn't be, it wouldn't surprise me whether those children aren't going to advance very far in this planet, and they're not going to learn much, because I think everything you do, life's a mystery, and there's a lot of, magic in it. But over-planning and worrying about money will make people have kids later, and then there's going to be social problems for all that too. So we're already starting to see it. So I think nature doesn't want us to do that, and when you fight it just because you've got a lot of bucks in your pocket, it won't end well. Just is what it is. But anyway.
And I think it's about the selling the lie. So, the whole, we're Australian, obviously, and so we grew up with this whole thing of the Great Australian Dream. And it was cemented into our generation, the Great Australian Dream. You've got to have your quarter acre and your nice little house with the white picket fence. That was the Great Australian Dream. To live in a home, basically have shelter, was considered like this far-reaching thing that was really hard to attain. And so people now slog themselves just to get into debt so that they can have these homes that just keep getting bigger and bigger, and these nice brand new cars and all of this stuff. But their debt is so high, and their miserableness is really high too, that they're not actually living in the moment. They're not living in the present. They're just accumulating. And what does it get you at the end of the day?
Yeah, it gets you nothing. You don't have time to think, because you just got to earn more dollars, get a second job to buy, pay for the house you couldn't
keeps
afford,
you down, lower vibration.
the car that you use to show off to your friends who don't give a shit anyway. Like, I don't care what anyone else owns, so no one else would either.
So it keeps you in low vibration, and that's a big part of the goal as well, is to keep low vibration and humanity suppressed with these things that people think they are trying to strive for.
Yeah, consumerism.
So, consumerism, and goals to me are not necessarily that. Like, you're allowed to have things in your life. I'm not saying that. I'm not, as I said, running off to the Himalayas to become a monk anytime soon. But I still believe that when you give too much credence to that energy, when you believe that that's what you're here for, then unfortunately that is a very low arcane, that's very earthly bound. So that means that you're stuck in that vibration. You can ascend that, you can change that. It's never too late. And that's the beautiful thing about that, is we're constantly in a battle within ourselves almost to try to keep that middle ground. And so if we can keep that going, then I think we're doing a real positive thing.
I agree, human being. That is the plan. The plan is greed and separation. The result is the snake eating itself, and it's working. It's such a simple plan people need to follow to create all this chaos, and again, just throw money at them and print free money and all the rest of it. Next slide, Mum.
Well, this is our last one.
Okay.
So this is a summary of basically what we talked about with the dates and the phases and the time frames. And we just used an example of two big events that have happened and are happening in the world, and how deep they will go to use those dates and how long they will plan them for. But the goal is to, when I say steal souls, they can't steal them without you willingly giving your soul. That's why but it's almost tricking you. So they tell you in all their religious documents, they tell you in everything that they're doing what the goal is. You know, so if you look at any of the main religions of the world, there is always a dark force that's trying to take souls off people, right? And then the good one comes in and saves them and forgives them and helps them so that they don't give their souls over. But who really is the dark force there? Because if you're following that mantra and you're giving all of your collective consciousness to an entity like that, then surely you're giving over your power, your soul, because you're believing, you've got faith in something that's not necessarily good either, because you lose your own ability to connect to something higher than yourself. So not stealing, but trying to trick you to give your soul over.
Well, even yesterday we were talking about Lucifer and how Lucifer actually means light.
Yep.
And so he's the guy who's supposed to be running around doing all this naughty stuff. But he's basically a fallen angel, but he's still light. So,
Yes.
you know, I don't think anyone is
been
pure
tricked.
evil. There's no thing that could do that. There has to be both within the
Yeah.
same. So,
I think it's interesting that they made the light the evil one.
yeah, it is. But the lights, isn't that the good stuff?
Yes.
Isn't the darkness bad? It's all a bit wacky,
Trick.
but again, it's in your face. Like
And then
they're
they'll
saying
say that Lucifer tricks you,
yeah,
but who's really tricking you?
yeah, totally. You're just doing it yourself. It's all your fault. you
Yeah,
know.
so it's all very interesting if people do get caught up in that though, because it's fear. And
Yeah.
fear feeds that darkness. We need fear for survival, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not, you know, at my age now, I'm not jumping off a, you know, mountain or cliff or bungee jumping or anything. Like, that's fear to me that makes sense, because it's like, okay, body doesn't want to do that. But fear is in, you know, collective fear over things that aren't actually happening is how they get people to give over your souls. And so they do that over time, and they're very patient with it too, don't you worry.
I think most of it's most things are done. It isn't politicians. They're not the problem. They're just actors. It's families that you don't even know who basically
They're
will
implicit
do
though, they are
centuries
implicit.
of this
They're
stuff.
complicit. They
Oh, they're complicit, yeah, but they got a price. So they're the people with a price, and
Yeah.
their price is pretty low, really, $1 million a year or
well,
something.
they've
That's-
usually already given their souls over.
Oh, totally.
That's why
They're
they're-
trained. They're trained for that. But yeah, there's definitely families at play who have time. They've got eons with their genealogy to, you
Dynasties.
know, to do what they need to do. That's how it works. And yeah, they're not people you're going to meet on the street or anything like that. And I don't even think it's the Bilderbergs and all those people. They're in your face. They're just more actors to blame for problems or whatever. But yeah, I think everyone just keep an eye on your fries, and you should be able to get through this, you know, this planet and leave it better than when you came.
So you can use times, phases, dates, astrological events, seasons. Your connection to those doesn't have to be full of knowledge. You don't have to be a full-time astrological genius to utilize these things. You can say when a new moon comes, you can state what your intentions are, for example, very simple things like that. When there's a full moon, you can, you know, bathe in the light of the moon and thank gravity, thank connection, thank the tides, thank the earth for that light that's illuminating the sky, admire its beauty. You can use things like astrology dates. So you can use things like when time is retrograde, when we have Mercury retrograde, for example. It might influence people more than others depending on their aspects in their chart. But you can pull back your energy a little bit during those periods. You know, there's so many things you can do without having to become, as I said, an expert in any of these fields. Just having a little bit of knowledge and just looking at nature and feeling your intuition with it too. You know, feeling your connections too. If things feel off that week, maybe just look up what's the planetary aspects this week. Oh, that makes sense. Okay, we've got a few harsh aspects going on. I feel a little bit drained, or I feel that things, you know, people are a little bit hectic this week, and so it might start to make sense to you why that's happening, and then you can claim your power back. So you can use things like, you know, eating healthy food. You can use things like drinking enough water, you know, stating your intentions on the right times of the year, looking at things like the main events of the seasons, like your summer solstice, your winter solstice, and your 2 equinoxes are the 4 real main ones you need to be in touch with. If you can be present during those events and just collect, you only need to do a mental kind of picture of this. You don't need to do any rituals or anything, but you can actually say how you want to go into the next season, how you want to use this light or challenge this darkness, or what you want to do. So say winter solstice is a time where you would gather your family and you would light your fire and you would, bring that warmth of your hearth together, and you would thank the universe, thank the energy of Mother Nature for your family, because it's just such a wonderful thing to have, or your friends, or those people that you consider close to you that love in your life. Summer solstice, you can celebrate the harvest. You can be very thankful for the bounty, for the warmth, for, the ability to connect back to nature. So there's so many things you can do, and that brings power back to yourself. So reclaim that power, go in and start to do that, even little bits, writing down your intentions, just being grateful. Practicing gratitude is one of the biggest beginning steps that I say to everybody. Even if you've got to write it down and practice it, it's something that if you think of, and I always say 3 things similar to what Tesla did, 3 things that you're grateful for every day, just think them in your mind. You don't have to write them down. It really will help you have that positive energy and feel more in touch with who you are as a person and why you're here. And the next one is question everything too around you, because if you just accept the status quo, if you just go, that's how it is, I accept that, then that's when things become dangerous and vulnerable for you.
Yes, I think we'll wrap it up, and we'll continue this as a series. It's going to expand out into different things and different, fields, and along with some others. So our plan this year is to get on, do a lot of lives, make a lot of content. We're reforming our lives. We're changing our business plans and all sorts of stuff, because we have a bit of a mission to fulfill. So you'll see all sorts of different things. We're never going to stick to one thing. It's kind of sucks for the the algorithms. They never understand who we are or what we're doing, because we have lots of different interests. And I'd like to thank a human being for your interactions.
Yeah, thank you. It's really good to have you here.
I was just reading more of his comments. Could be a girl, sorry. You're just a human being. I didn't gender anyone. Yeah, totally. So yeah, thanks a lot, human being, for being a part of it, and we'll wrap it up, and we'll probably be back on next week, and we always throw out videos during the week as well, that kind of thing. So
it's been great. Thank you, guys. It's been wonderful just to be able to just present this the beginning of this series, because I feel like it's going to be very, very positive, because we often talk about all of this stuff, and why not package it up and also share knowledge and receive knowledge from others who are aware as well. And also for those who might be just starting their journey learning about all of this, I think it can be a really interesting topic. And even if you don't agree necessarily, come in and share your thoughts too, because I don't think this is all about, this is my opinion, this is what I think. It's definitely a space where people can come in and share what they think as well.
Absolutely. We've got very thick skin, so not worried what people say. Everyone's allowed to say whatever they want. Don't worry, me, we're not going to censor anyone or do anything. Obviously the program might censor you if you start swearing or something, but otherwise feel free to comment. You don't have to agree with us at all. It's not a problem, and everyone is different, and we quite respect that, but